I am sitting in a small rented apartment staring out the window as the first light of morning creeps across the sky. My phone has been buzzing all night. 14 missed calls from my mom and my sister Brooke. Just last night, Brooke screamed at me that I had ruined their lives. My mom echoed her words, saying they would be happier without me. I did not fight back. I just left quietly. But this morning, everything changed. Before we dive into this story, let me know in the comments where you are watching from today. If you are new here, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Stay with me until the very end because what I discovered this morning changed everything I thought I knew about my own family. Let me take you back to where it all began. I grew up in a middle-class family in the suburbs of Chicago. We were not rich, but we were comfortable. My father worked at a manufacturing plant, putting in long hours to provide for us. My mother, Linda, worked part-time at a flower shop downtown. My older sister, Brooke, was 4 years ahead of me, and growing up, we had what I thought was a normal sibling relationship. Everything changed when I was 19 years old. My father was killed in a workplace accident. A forklift malfunctioned, and just like that, the man who had been the backbone of our family was gone. I remember standing at his funeral, watching my mother collapse into grief, watching Brooke cling to her husband Dylan, who she had married just a year before. At that moment, I knew my life was about to change forever. Brooke and Dylan were struggling financially back then. Dylan had just lost his job at a tech startup that went under, and they were barely making their rent payments. My mother was devastated, and her part-time income at the flower shop was nowhere near enough to cover the mortgage on our family home. The bills were piling up, and I could see the stress wearing everyone down. I had just received my acceptance letter to college. I had earned a partial scholarship to study engineering, something I had dreamed about since I was a kid, taking apart old radios in our garage. But when I looked at the numbers, when I saw the fear in my mother's eyes, every time she opened the mailbox, I made a decision that would define the next 13 years of my life. I gave up my spot at college. I told myself I would go back someday, that this was just temporary. I got a job at an auto repair shop during the day, working on engines and transmissions. At night, I picked up shifts doing food delivery. Between the two jobs, I was working nearly 70 hours a week, but I did not complain. This was my family, and family takes care of each other. Every month I sent money home. At first, it was just a few $100s to help with the mortgage, but as time went on, the requests grew. Brooke needed help with her car payment. Mom needed a new roof. Dylan was between jobs again, and they were behind on their credit cards. I said yes to everything. I never questioned it because I believed that this was what a good son, a good brother was supposed to do. 13 years passed. I watched from a distance as Brooke and Dylan bought a nice house in a good neighborhood. I watched as they had 2 beautiful children. I watched as my mother paid off the mortgage and started taking vacations to places she had always dreamed of visiting. And through it all, I stayed in my small rented room near the auto shop, working the same 2 jobs, sending money home like clockwork. I calculated it once out of curiosity. Over 13 years, I had sent my family more than $150,000. That money could have paid for my education. It could have bought me a house. It could have given me a chance at building a life of my own. But instead, it went to my family, and I told myself that was enough. Their happiness was my happiness. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. The phone calls from home became less frequent. When I did call, my mother always seemed rushed, eager to get off the phone. Brooke rarely responded to my text messages anymore. I would send updates about my life, ask about the kids, and receive one-word answers days later. I told myself they were just busy. People have their own lives. It did not mean anything. I kept sending the money every month like I always did. I never missed a payment. Even when my car broke down and I had to take the bus for 3 months because I could not afford repairs, I still made sure that check went out on the 1st of every month. That was my responsibility, and I was not going to let my family down. It was a Friday evening in late October when everything came crashing down. I was just getting home from my shift at the shop, covered in grease and exhausted to my bones, when my phone rang. It was Brooke, and she never called me anymore. Her voice was cold, almost clinical. She told me I needed to come home immediately. There was a family matter that required my presence, and it could not wait. When I asked if Mom was okay if someone was sick, she just repeated that I needed to come. Then she hung up. I did not even shower. I grabbed my keys and drove 3 hours through the night. my mind racing with terrible possibilities. Had something happened to my mother? Was one of the kids hurt? By the time I pulled into the driveway of the family home, my hands were shaking, but when I walked through the front door, nobody was sick. Nobody was hurt. My mother was sitting on the couch, her arms crossed. Brooke was standing by the fireplace with Dylan beside her. They all turned to look at me, and I knew immediately that something was very wrong. Brooke did not waste any time. She walked over to the dining table and picked up a stack of papers, then thrust them toward me. I took them with trembling hands, trying to understand what I was looking at. It was a loan application. A business loan for $80,000. Dylan spoke up, then explaining that he had an incredible opportunity to start his own consulting firm. He had investors lined up, clients ready to sign, everything was perfect. The only problem was the bank required a guarantor, someone with stable assets to back the loan. They wanted me to sign. I stared at the papers, then looked up at my sister. I told her I did not have any assets. I did not have savings. Everything I had earned for the past 13 years had gone to them. How could I possibly guarantee a loan for $80,000 when I did not even own a car that was worth more than $2,000? Brooke laughed. It was not a kind laugh. She asked me what I meant, that I had nothing. Where had all my money gone? I must have been hiding it somewhere, saving it up while pretending to be the struggling martyr. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. I reminded her about the monthly payments, the mortgage help, the car payment, the roof, the credit card debt, the birthday gifts, the Christmas presents, year after year after year. Did she not remember any of it? My mother finally spoke up, but not to defend me. She waved her hand dismissively and said that was ancient history. A few $100s here and there over the years did not add up to anything significant. I was exaggerating to make myself look good. I pulled out my phone. I showed them my bank statements, the records of every transfer I had made over 13 years. The total was right there in black and white, $153,000 in change, sent to this family, my entire adult life wrapped up in numbers on a screen. Brooke barely glanced at it. She said that even if that was true, it did not matter now. What mattered was that Dylan had this opportunity and I was being selfish by refusing to help. After everything they had done for me growing up, this was how I repaid them. I could not believe what I was hearing. I asked her what exactly they had done for me. I had given up college. I had worked 2 jobs for over a decade. I had sent every spare dollar I earned to this family, and now I was being called selfish for not having anything left to give. That was when Brooke exploded. Her face turned red and she screamed at me that I had ruined their lives. This was their one chance at financial freedom, and I was destroying it because I was too jealous, too bitter to help my own family succeed. My mother stood up from the couch. She looked at me with an expression I had never seen before, a mixture of disgust and disappointment. She said they would be happier without me. She said I had always been the difficult one, the one who made everything about myself. My father would be ashamed of me. He always put family first. I stood there in the middle of that living room, surrounded by furniture that my money had helped buy, looking at the faces of people I had sacrificed everything for. Brooke was wearing the diamond ring I had contributed to for her birthday last year. My mother was sitting on the new sofa I had paid for just 2 months ago, and they were telling me I had ruined their lives. Something broke inside me in that moment. Not dramatically, not with tears or shouting. It was quieter than that. It was like a string that had been pulled too tight for too long finally snapped. I looked at my sister, then at my mother, then at Dylan, who had sat silently through the whole thing, not saying a word in my defense. I did not argue. I did not try to explain myself again. I simply reached into my pocket, pulled out my car keys, and walked toward the door. Brooke called after me, demanding to know where I thought I was going. My mother told me I was proving them right by running away. I did not respond. I just kept walking. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove away from the house I had helped save the family. I had helped support the life I had helped build for everyone except myself. I drove until I found a cheap motel about an hour outside the city. The room smelled like stale cigarettes, and the carpet was worn thin, but it was quiet. It was away from them. That was all I needed. I lay on the bed and stared at the water-stained ceiling. My phone started buzzing almost immediately. First Brooke, then my mother, then Brooke again. I let it ring. When the voicemails started coming in, I listened to them with a strange sense of detachment. Brooke was furious in her messages. She demanded I come back and sign those papers. She called me ungrateful, pathetic, a failure. My mother's messages were different. She cried and asked how I could do this to them, how I could be so selfish, how I could abandon my family when they needed me most. I turned off my phone. For the first time in 13 years, I was completely unreachable. And instead of feeling guilty, instead of feeling the crushing weight of obligation that had defined my entire adult life, I felt something unexpected. I felt light. I felt free. I slept better that night than I had in years. When I woke up the next morning, pale sunlight was filtering through the thin curtains. I reached for my phone and turned it on, watching as the notifications flooded in. 14 missed calls, multiple voicemails, text messages from both Brooke and my mother. But something was different. The most recent messages were not angry. Brooke's last text simply said, "Please call me back, something happened." My mother's voicemail was not accusatory. Her voice was shaking and she just kept saying she needed to talk to me, please. I did not call back right away. Instead, I got dressed and walked to a small diner down the street. I ordered coffee and eggs and sat by the window watching the world wake up around me. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I was not rushing to help someone else. I was just existing, taking up space in the world, and that was allowed. My phone rang again while I was finishing my breakfast. I did not recognize the number at first, but when I answered, I heard a familiar voice. It was Mrs. Patterson, the elderly woman who had lived next door to my family for as long as I could remember. She had watched me grow up, had always been kind to me when I was a kid. She apologized for calling out of the blue, but she said she had heard what happened and she thought I deserved to know the truth. I gripped the phone tighter, my coffee growing cold in front of me. Mrs. Patterson told me that after I left the night before, there had been a terrible fight. Not between my family and me, but between Brooke and Dylan. Apparently, Dylan had finally confessed something he had been hiding for years. He knew about the money. He had always known. Years ago, he had accidentally seen some bank statements that showed the transfers I was making to my mother and sister. But instead of telling them the truth, he had let them believe the money came from other sources. Government assistance programs. Life insurance from my father that had supposedly been found years after his death. Savings accounts nobody knew about. Dylan had kept my sacrifice a secret because it benefited him. As long as Brooke and my mother thought the money was coming from somewhere else, they remained dependent on him as the man of the house, the decision-maker, the one who managed the finances. If they knew their brother and son had been supporting them all along, it would have changed everything. But when I refused to sign those loan papers, when I showed them the bank statements proving what I had done, Dylan knew his lie was about to unravel. That was why he stayed silent during the confrontation. He was hoping I would just leave, that everyone would be too angry to look closely at the truth. After I drove away, Brooke had been so upset that she started going through their files, looking for something, anything that might help convince me to come back. And that was when she found them. Stacks of bank statements that Dylan had hidden in a locked drawer in his desk. 13 years of evidence showing exactly where the money had come from, exactly how much I had given, exactly how long I had been quietly keeping my family afloat. Mrs. Patterson's voice was gentle as she told me what happened next. Brooke had confronted Dylan and he had finally admitted everything. The screaming match that followed woke up half the neighborhood. By midnight, Brooke had thrown Dylan out of the house. My mother had locked herself in her room, sobbing. They had spent the rest of the night trying to call me, but not to demand anything this time. They wanted to apologize. They wanted to understand how they had gotten everything so wrong. They wanted to know if there was any way to fix what they had broken. I sat in that diner booth for a long time after Mrs. Patterson hung up. The eggs on my plate had gone cold. My coffee was bitter and lukewarm, but I did not move. I was processing everything, trying to figure out how I felt. The strange thing was I was not angry anymore. The rage I had expected to feel, the vindication of being proven right, it was not there. Instead, I felt a kind of peace. The truth was out. They finally knew, and somehow that was enough. I paid for my breakfast and walked back to the motel. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at my phone, at all those missed calls and desperate messages. And I made a decision. I would call them back. I would hear what they had to say. But things would be different now. I was not going to go back to being the invisible support system, the ATM with a heartbeat. the family member who gave everything and expected nothing in return. If we were going to rebuild our relationship, it would be on new terms. My terms. I picked up the phone and dialed Brooke's number. She answered on the first ring. Her voice was raw, like she had been crying for hours. She started apologizing before I could even say hello. The words tumbled out of her in a rush, how sorry she was, how she had no idea, how she could not believe what Dylan had done, how she could not believe what she had said to me. I let her talk. I let her get it all out. When she finally stopped, when the line went quiet except for her ragged breathing, I spoke. I told her I accepted her apology. I told her I understood that she had been deceived, but I also told her that her words had still come from somewhere. Even if she did not know the full truth, she had been willing to believe the worst about me. She had been willing to call me a failure, to say I had ruined their lives without ever stopping to ask about mine. She started crying again. She said I was right. She said she had been so caught up in her own life, her own problems, that she had forgotten I was a person too. She had taken me for granted for so long that she had stopped seeing me altogether. My mother got on the phone next. Her apology was harder to hear. She talked about how after my father died, she had been so lost, so overwhelmed, that she had leaned on me without realizing how much weight she was putting on my shoulders. She had watched me give up my dreams and told herself it was fine because I seemed fine. She never asked if I was struggling because she did not want to know the answer. I told her I forgave her. I meant it. But I also told her that forgiveness did not mean things would go back to the way they were. I had spent 13 years putting everyone else first. Now I needed to figure out who I was when I was not just supporting everyone else. We talked for a long time that morning. There were tears, there were long silences, there were moments where I did not know if we would ever find our way back to each other. But by the time I hung up, something had shifted. Not fixed, not healed, but shifted. There was an opening now where there had only been walls before. I did not go back home that day. Instead, I drove back to my small apartment in the city and started making plans. I used what little savings I had managed to scrape together to enroll in night classes at a community college. It was not the engineering degree I had dreamed of at 19, but it was a start. It was something for me. The months that followed were not easy. Rebuilding a relationship with my family was slow, painful work. There were setbacks and misunderstandings, and moments where I wondered if it was even worth trying. But gradually things began to change. Brooke started calling me not to ask for anything but just to talk. My mother began asking about my life, my classes, my hopes for the future. They started seeing me as a person, not just a resource. I learned something important through all of this. Sometimes the people who love you need to lose you before they realize how much you meant to them. And sometimes walking away is not giving up. It is the bravest thing you can do. Not for them, but for yourself. Looking back now, I do not regret the years I spent helping my family. That money, that time, that sacrifice, it came from a place of love. What I regret is losing myself in the process. I regret becoming so focused on being needed that I forgot I deserved to be wanted too. If you are watching this and you recognize yourself in my story, if you are the one who always gives and never receives, the one who sacrifices in silence and wonders why nobody notices, I want you to know something. Your worth is not measured by what you provide for others. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to have dreams. You are allowed to put yourself first sometimes without feeling guilty about it. Family is important, but so are you. I want to hear from you now. Have you ever been in a situation where you gave everything to someone who did not appreciate it? How did you find the strength to set boundaries and put yourself first? Drop your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and your experience might help someone else who is going through the same thing. If this story touched you, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you have not already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you do not miss any of our stories. Thank you so much for watching and for being part of this community. Remember, no matter what you are going through, you are not alone. Take care of yourself, be kind to yourself, and I will see you in the next one.